Okay, good evening everyone. Hope you're all having a good evening after Ibrahim's speech, which was very stirring and yes, very good. Yes, I've worked for show racing for quite a while now, having lived through a lot of the racism stuff that we see now. It was back then. So I've just got a few words that I'm going to say, which hopefully will not keep you too long. Then I'll do the presentation, then I'll be out of your way. Okay? Right. Sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to youth in a language they understand. Sport can create hope where once there was only despair. It is more powerful than government in breaking down racial barriers. Nelson Mandela said that, and if there's anybody that knows and understands that, he's the one that does. It is a long road to freedom, and my freedom, and by freedom, I mean equality, living together in tolerance. It is a road where sport enables us to follow in the footsteps of giants or create our own path. The key moment in Mandela's sporting life was in 1995 at the Rugby World Cup in Johannesburg in South Africa. Mandela had been sworn in as President of South Africa only a year before, the nation's first black president. Now, let that sink in, that he was the very first black president of South Africa, which is quite an amazing thing, okay? And there were plenty who were none too pleased with the tides that were changing their very existence. The possibility of rioting, or worse, looming large over the match between South Africa and New Zealand. Mandela said it was the most nervous he'd ever been in his life. Even more so than the morning in 1962 when he was captured. In 1992, South Africa had been awarded the Rugby World Cup, and Mandela allowed the competition to proceed. The South African national team, the Springboks, had only one non-white player. But Mandela convinced the nation to pull together as one and root for the Springboks. South Africa would go on to win the game, and South Africans, both black and white, celebrated the victory and winning the World Cup. But remember it mostly because of one astonishing and brave gesture. Before the crowd of 65,000 people, that was almost completely white, Mandela strode onto the field wearing a Springbok jersey, and I don't know if any of you remember that. A green jersey that was hated by so many who saw it as a symbol of apartheid repression. The world does not forget the image of Nelson Mandela in that number 6 Springbok jersey, holding up the Webb Ellis Cup with Francois Pienaar. A powerful image indeed. I can still see that and picture that today. And in 2007, John Smith at the Stade de France in Paris, 12 years on, left hand around the trophy and right hand linked with Nelson Mandela's successor, Thabo Mbeki. Again, memorable things that we all remember. Now move forward to just a couple of days ago, 2nd of November 2019, as a new South Africa took to the field. Rassie Erasmus' squad of 31 had 11 black players. Now you think back to what I said originally, there was only one black player. Now we've got 11 playing for South Africa. And Japan, being the first Asian nation to host the Rugby World Cup, was to also play a host to the most inspirational scene of change imaginable. It was the turn of Siya Kolisi to walk in those great footsteps, the first black man to captain the Springboks. And if you all think back to what that meant, and what that meant when I saw him walk out in front of them in that World Cup on the weekend, it was quite an astonishing moment to behold, to see that. He was born on the 16th of June 1991, one day before the repeal of apartheid, a law that enforced discrimination against black people in every aspect of their lives. In a country where rugby is a vital part of life, we're a sport that has been traditionally linked to privilege. This kid, literally from nowhere, who had nothing, led a team of black and white sports South African players to victory. That victory was not just a scoreline, but in the scenes shown all around the world following that game, where you had players, supporters, staff, all colours united in that victory. Khaleesi stands as a critical link between the past and the future. By all accounts, a humble man who wants his sporting journey to continue to create the footprints of change, not just for South Africa, where his influence is reaching across the playing field to the people and to politicians. I imagine that there are some of you out there wondering, what is this former footballer talking so much about rugby? But I'm sure you will appreciate that as a sports person, a black sports person, what I witnessed at the weekend was both historic and hopeful. My own career started from humble beginnings, but in comparison to those of Khaleesi, it was quite a good start. I was well loved in a large family from Jamaica, a family that followed traditional values in lifestyle. My parents wanted a better life for me and all my siblings.
He's just going to come and speak.
And in the early 60s, they set off and sailed the very same route as the Windrush pioneers did before us. They worked hard, they built a home and contributed to the local community. Aged 5, myself, brother and sister, we were sent for and we arrived in England. We travelled on a plane and we arrived in Willesden of all places. A place where, surprisingly, in retrospect, everyone seemed to be welcoming. There was an occasional wait for my mum in shops, and you had the odd look every now and then as you walked down the streets, but generally it was a very welcoming place. But it was winter, and having come from the Caribbean where it was very warm, imagine, if you will, the joy of running outside in bare feet when it starts to snow. And you walk, just because you want to take a closer look. Certainly no warm welcome there with the weather, I can assure you. My mother ran the home just as you would expect in a West Indian family. She instilled in us good manners and behaviour and explained the meaning of, if you've read Sir Lenny Henry's book, the famous word, integration. That's what they've said, you know? What that means is you fit in, you behave well and carry yourself well and do the very best you can. That's what fitting in is all about. So we were smartly dressed, we went to church, and yes, we got used to wearing shoes, because never wore them when we were in Jamaica, I can guarantee you that. But we still ate West Indian food, and we still observed West Indian culture and traditions. We went to school, and we did well. I even won a science prize, which surprised everyone. But around the same time, I developed a passion. I lusted after the thing that most teenage boys, lust about in the playground when you're all talking together. Football. You wondered where I was going with that, didn't you? But yeah, it's football. It all started for me from the age of about 7. Football, and with my newfound sport, I gained my first role model. And that role model was George Best. A white man that spoke with a strange accent, loved the drink, loved the smoke, and other things. But he was my role model because he was one of the most amazing footballers that I ever seen. And with that, that's who I wanted to be. And that was really me set on the path where I wanted to go. And it's interesting, if you do become successful, you can become a role model regardless of colour. I have personally had many white football fans at Watford come to me and say, when I was at school and we were playing football in the playground, I was you. I wanted to be Luther Blisset. And that gives you a very warm feeling, a very satisfying feeling that you've had that impression on people. Sport and success can transcend boundaries, and so it is a powerful channel for acceptance and change. For me, it really all started aged 15, when a group of my mates jumped on the tube and we went to an open training session at Watford Football Club. And the rest, as they say, is history. I was taken on by a manager whose coaches saw something in my potential, but whose assistant was happy to tell the press that I could only play with the sun on my back. Words that I have never forgotten because their implication was clear. Did I complain? No, because I wanted to play football. Luckily, we were blessed with a new manager, and those words were swept aside as I came under the guidance of a man who simply saw me as a footballer, Graham Taylor. He and his coaches believed in my potential and gave me a chance regardless of what the weather was like. So that was the founding. I remember the first time I met Graham Taylor and these words. He said to me, the first words he said to me as I walked into his office, he said, "Luther Blisset. Luther Blisset." And he said my name again, Luther Blisset. Then he had a pause. And then he said, "With a name like that, son, you've got to be a star." And thankfully, he was right. And through Graham's guidance, I started a tremendous career, the highlights of which was my mum getting a phone call to say, "Your son has been picked to represent England in the forthcoming international at Wembley," which was a most amazing time. And that game was against Germany, or West Germany as it was back then. My mum still has a picture of me in that England strip now in the tracksuit on her wall, and she proudly points it out to everybody that comes around, even to this day. And so it was. I entered the history books, the first black man to score for England, and the first black man to score a hat-trick for England as well. A most special and amazing day. Thank you. I remember walking out on that hallowed turf at Wembley. An incredible feeling, a matter of immense pride in my country. But not all my fellow Englishmen felt the same. Like Sir Regis and others, I was to experience the disapproval of a black man could get for lining up for England. Imagine this. I'm going to collect my mail, as you do, and you think fan mail and various other things at the club. And I open the envelope, and a bullet falls out onto the floor. That is something I'll never forget. And that was just somebody saying, "You play for England again, and that is what you're going to get." But that didn't deter me, and so it shouldn't. Like the other black players of my time, we took the abuse from the terrorists in the only way we knew how, with dignity. We felt that the best way to stop them was to silence them with our football, and so to a certain extent, that worked. I went to Bournemouth, AC Milan, and coached Watford to the Premier League, having won 14 caps for my country and 2 golden boots for being the highest goal scorer in Europe. Yes, I am proud. But I'm also proud when I see the change that young footballers today are making. Players like Raheem Sterling, absolutely role model, absolutely, who speaks out because times have changed. And today, we do have a voice. Working with Show Race and the Red Card, I've spent a lot of time in schools talking to youngsters about tolerance and discrimination. My voice resonates with them, and we hope that the work we do brings them confidence and courage to have their own voice. They may not recognize my playing career, but they respect that I have played for this country. They ask questions, they join in with coaching, and they realize that they too can stand proud and achieve good things. The sport that I love playing can only help to do that. Football reflects society as a whole, good and bad. So when today's young people, young players I should say, connect through social media or on the screen to say that discrimination has no place in society, it is a very powerful thing. Only recently, the England team were faced by open racism in Bulgaria. I spoke at length on the media with young players and fans. For me, the key issue is to take a stand, use your voice, and demand that those who are responsible for football introduce the harshest penalties for this sort of behaviour. There is no place for it in society today, and we can make sure that it stops. Supported by education from Show Race and the Red Card, football is creating a new generation who will have the character to say they are colourblind, that everyone can be accepted for who they are, based on how they conduct themselves in life. Before coming here, I read about a team called Ahmedspor in Turkey, and the challenges they face as fans to even attend the game, let alone for their players to be treated with respect as footballers. They commented there was a saying in Turkey, and I'm sure a lot of you will know this: "We will win by resisting." And it struck home with me how powerful that was. Resist. Nobody has to accept discrimination. I started by saying that this was a great weekend, not just because of the rugby and the change we can see for South Africa. There was also an incredible feat by Lewis Hamilton to win his 6th Drivers' Champion in Formula One, in one of the most elite sports there is. And then there was a simple act of resistance in football just yesterday, when another AC Milan footballer, Mario Balotelli, simply stopped, kicked the ball into the stand and walked off the pitch with dignity. And when he was racially abused in Italy, he forced those in charge to face the situation. He did not leave it to others. He resisted. And those on the field with him supported him. Both sides, all colours, united. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant evening.